Discover the surprising truth. Could our amazing Earth become uninhabitable in just 100 years? Sarah stood before her cluttered desk, heart racing as she absorbed the research that had her mind reeling. The glossy graphs and projections painted a dire future, one that sent sensations of dread curving around her chest. Could this truly be what lay ahead for Emily? For her students? The words uninhabitable echoed in her mind, thrumming with urgency. What could she do? How could she prepare them for a world no one seemed ready to confront, let alone accept? Her fingers trembled, searching for stable ground amidst her own despair. She needed to inspire, to share this weight of knowledge, and yet fear gnawed at her insides. What would they believe? Would they even care? Even as she envisioned the bright faces of her students lighting up with curiosity, there was Mr. Jenkins' voice reverberating in her ears, mocking her ambitions, inserting seeds of doubt. Would he really sanction it, or was he simply the final nail in her aspirations? She gritted her teeth, frustration bubbling beneath her skin, as she recalled his blatant dismissal of the importance of environmental education. They didn't understand. This wasn't just another lesson. It was a call to awareness. Before she could wrestle with her worries further, a thought broke through, one she wished would remain distant. If placing these truths before her students meant risking everything she worked for, was it worth the jeopardy? The memory of her bank account hanging by a thread swept violently across her thoughts. A murmur of the past closed in on her as she glanced at Emily's drawing tucked beside her biography of Rachel Carson. "Mommy's brave," her daughter had written, and guilt punched through her like a bullet. How could she embody bravery when fear was becoming her greatest companion? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The moment escalated, unbearable tension radiating from the thought of calling upon her estranged mother, a retired environmental scientist whose lessons on oversight and stewardship filled her childhood. Would reaching out expose long-buried anger, or reveal the insight she desperately sought? A wave of shame washed over her. Relying on someone whose trust she fractured felt weak, inauthentic. But amidst the uncertainty, a tether to her lineage formed, igniting an ember of determination. She flipped through her mother's old notes, tracing the ink as it whispered forgotten tales of resilience and sacrifice. Could their legacy become her guiding light? Yet apprehension floods forth ceaselessly. What if Mr. Jenkins put an end to her plans without a second thought? Risking their stability to inspire a future seemed reckless when the weight of responsibility for Emily's future pressed heavily against her skin. With the clock ticking, an email appeared on her screen, one subject line threatening to annihilate her resolve. Heart racing, she braced herself, fingers hesitating over the keys. Would she fight against a tide of backlash or remain silent to keep Emily's life intact? The storm of her thoughts crashed, leaving her at the precipice of despair. The future she dreamed of for her daughter felt like a distant mirage, shifting out of reach. In the vast chaos of her own heart, the question lingered: what price was she willing to pay to stand for change? As Sarah stared at her computer screen, breath catching in her throat, she felt the weight of indecision envelop her. Every fiber of her being screamed to take a stand, yet the shadow of consequences loomed as dark as a thundercloud. What if her voice broke through the expected silence? What if it made a difference? The dilemma twisted within her between self-preservation and the call to action. She had to pull herself back from the brink. She took a deep breath, pushing through the escalating tension. Maybe it was time to revisit her mother's teachings, to reevaluate the values instilled in her during childhood. Her mother, with her unwavering passion for the environment, might hold the wisdom she needed to navigate this precarious path. With shaky hands, Sarah opened a new tab, searching for her mother's contact information. Was there still a bridge to repair? The phone call came on unsteady fingers, the ringing echoing her mounting anxiety. When her mother's familiar voice finally answered, it jolted Sarah. The sound was simultaneously comforting and disorienting. She hesitated, words caught in her throat. Just as she was about to hang up, the memory of Emily's drawing surged forth, imbuing her with newfound strength. "Mom, it's me," she finally managed, urgency threading through her words. The conversation unfolded, an emotional tug-of-war where bitterness met understanding. Her mother's probing questions only intensified Sarah's resolve, forcing her to articulate the crux of her struggle. "Mom, I need guidance. It's not just for me, this is for Emily and her generation. The research I found, it's terrifying." A pregnant pause lingered on the line before her mother spoke, carefully selecting her words. "You've always had the heart for this, Sarah. Remember that knowledge without action is empty. Speak up. Your students need your courage. It will be worth it, no matter the cost." With those words, a flicker of clarity ignited. She realized she had knowledge others were blinded to. It was a message that was necessary, and she possessed the tenacity to express it. Before they hung up, Sarah felt emboldened, recognizing this moment as a stepping stone toward professional growth. She thought of Rachel Carson, the enduring legacy of someone who chose to stand up when it mattered. Fingers steady now, she opened up a document, crafting a message that evoked both urgency and hope. The email would encompass her findings, the data crushed beneath weariness wrapped instead in a call for action, an invitation for dialogue. But as she tapped out each line, doubt trickled back in. Could she hold her ground against Mr. Jenkins? The auditorium loomed in her imagination, a place she envisioned filled with students, ready to confront their own futures lost in the potential apathy of adulthood. Maybe the responses would be mixed, but she had to believe that some flickers of inspiration would spark within them. Perhaps that was her win, the start of something monumental. Finishing the draft, she took a deep breath, nervously reviewing her words. And then she hit send. She leaned back, mind spinning at the audacity of her own decision, a newfound resolve washing over her. The path ahead felt more daunting than ever, a labyrinth of challenges. Still, she was no longer paralyzed. Yet, the dread of repercussions lingered like a specter over her ambitions. Would Mr. Jenkins view her revelations as insubordination? The answers loomed tantalizingly close yet obscured, leaving her on the edge of uncertainty. How much would she truly risk to uphold her vision? The questions circled her like a relentless predator. Just as her decision crystallized, the unmistakable sound of her office door creaking open interrupted her reverie, reminding her that someone, perhaps Mr. Jenkins, was about to walk in. With her heart pounding, she braced herself for the confrontation that awaited her, anticipation coiling in her stomach. What would she say? What would he demand? Sarah stood taller, steadfast in her convictions, a woman pushed to the precipice, ready to see how her choices would shape the future. The door swung open slowly. Sarah's breath stalled as Mr. Jenkins entered, his imposing figure eclipsing any comfort she had managed to muster. The air thickened with tension, her previous resolve now wrapped in a layer of apprehension. He approached her desk, the corners of his mouth pinched, eyes scrutinizing. "Sarah," he began, an air of authority woven through his tone. "I received your email." Dread spilled into her stomach, twisting into a knot. "Yes, do you really think it's wise to share such radical findings with the students?" His words cut through her like glass, each syllable a reminder of her precarious position. She forced herself to meet his gaze, the weight of her beliefs colliding with his skepticism. "It's not radical, it's accurate. The research shows alarming trends. If we don't address these issues now, we risk their future. I have a responsibility as an educator." His jaw tightened, and she could sense his disapproval churning beneath the surface. "Your responsibility is to educate, not to instill fear." Insult ignited a spark within her, fed by the beliefs she had considered earlier. Fear or awareness? A darker future can't be ignored, Mr. Jenkins. The students deserve to be informed. They will inherit these problems. He barked a laugh, both cynical and disbelieving. Inheritance is one thing, Showing them what's wrong with the world is another. You may ignite panic, unyielding panic that leads to discontent. Or motivate them to change it. She countered, voice steady despite her pounding heart. The moment hung between them, electric with potential realization. Have you thought about the consequences of leading them to action? His tone shifted slightly, less condescending, but laden with challenge. Not all sides of a situation can be considered righteous. His words spun around her like a cyclone, and she grasped at her own thoughts, searching for a foothold. What was she willing to risk for the future of her students? Would she hold fast to her ideals even if it meant crossing paths with obstacles designed to crush them? Change isn't birthed in comfort, Mr. Jenkins. The truth is uncomfortable, but it is necessary, she asserted. A hint of defiance colored her voice, pushing her deeper into her convictions. Did you ever consider that change can come without disruption? A measured approach may yield more constructive outcomes, he suggested, a glimmer of insight flashing across his face. But she felt it, her pulse quickened at the thought of lying low, of glossing over the genuine concerns dwelling in her mind. This wasn't just about her, it was about what kind of legacy she would leave. The flame of her mother's unwavering passion flickered in her heart, urging her on. True change requires disruption, Mr. Jenkins. Students need to learn how serious these issues are if they are to care. She shot back. The conviction in her voice surprised even her. It lit the room with the desperate hope she clung to. He studied her, a moment strung with heavy silence, the kind that could crack under pressure. Just then, he shifted slightly, pulling back the air of authority he wielded. What do you propose we do then? The invitation felt like a chasm opening beneath her, a chance to proffer a path she had envisioned. Let us hold a forum, a space for students to discuss these issues openly, direct their fears into action-oriented solutions. Mr. Jenkins regarded her with a blend of contemplation and skepticism. And if the fear overwhelms them, they can't see beyond the immediate threats, Sarah. She paused as the weight of his statement settled over her. Would she be leading them into the unknown abyss? Her heart raced, caught between optimism and the reality of their circumstances. Yet somehow, the prospect ignited a flicker of inspiration paired with resolve. We can't afford not to try. Isn't that what education is truly about, sparking curiosity to drive change? Slowly, a crease appeared between his brows, the tension between them receding just slightly. Perhaps there was a sliver of understanding buried beneath the skepticism. Having taken the plunge, there was no retreat now. She had opened the door to dialogue, to potential collaboration. As Mr. Jenkins took a step back, contemplating her suggestion, Sarah's heart raced with anticipation. She had challenged the status quo and ignited a conversation that could shift their trajectory. But as hope began to bloom, a new worry started to niggle at her thoughts. What would happen if others resisted this unfolding change? The uncertainty loomed ahead, tantalizing and ominous. Would they recognize the value in her voice? Or would she find herself standing alone once again? Just then, his expression shifted, a calculating look in his eyes. Think long and hard about your next steps, Sarah. You might find that this path doesn't lead where you think it will. With that, he turned, leaving her gasping within the whirlwind of possibilities and consequences, the weight of her choices pressing upon her shoulders like never before. As the office door clicked shut, Sarah sat in the charged silence, her mind racing through the implications of her actions and the clarity she had fought to grasp. The moment felt pivotal, but yet, she knew there was more at stake. The question lingered. How far was she willing to push against the current? The answer felt more tantalizing than any fear of failure. Time elapsed slowly after Mr. Jenkins' departure, the silence in the office amplifying the trembling echoes in Sarah's mind. As she stared at her scattered notes, fleeting thoughts collided with one another, creating a chaotic landscape that mirrored her inner turmoil. Her pulse quickened with the realization of everything at stake. The forum had the potential to be transformative, yet it opened her to the kinds of pushback she had experienced before. There was no way to go back. She had committed to the idea, and with it, she had opened Pandora's box. As her fingers traced the edges of her papers, a fierce determination ignited within. This was about more than just data. It spoke to her yearning to incite passion in her students and empower them to think critically about pressing global issues. Across from her desk, the clock ticked louder, reminding her of impending deadlines and the whispers of colleagues who might question her integrity. The prospect of her own vulnerability sent a shiver down her spine. What if they saw her as an outcast for championing an idea that demanded discomfort? Would her authority be undermined? Yet, the thought of retreat churned uncomfortably in her stomach. She began to prep for the forum meticulously, jotting down not just facts, but strategic questions aimed at fostering open discussion. With each stroke of her pen, she crafted a narrative meant to resonate, not just to inform, but to inspire. It was her chance not merely to educate, but to teach students how to engage with the world around them. But her conviction was not without precursors. She recalled past instances, moments when she had faltered under scrutiny, swallowed her voice in the name of harmony, only to watch as disengagement settled like dust in the corners of her classroom. No longer could she let fear dictate her choices. As days unfolded into a week, the tension in the faculty lounge shifted. Whispers about Sarah's upcoming forum circulated, mingling with caution and skepticism. She braced herself for the inevitable confrontation, anxiety battling against her growing resolve. What she lacked in experience, she would make up for in passion, armed with the knowledge that persistence often carved pathways through systemic fear. In her evenings, Sarah practiced delivering her new material, testing her rhetoric on the mirror's reflection. Words tumbled from her lips, lively and poignant. She convinced herself in the dark surroundings of her home that she was a catalyst for change. But a question still gnawed at her. Would her peers see her as such? When she sought the opinions of her friends, she craved encouragement but met with mixed responses. A voice of caution warned her about stepping into politically charged waters, while another declared it as her right to lead and to enlighten. Each conversation chipped away at the facade of confidence she had worn so carefully. The night before the forum arrived, and she barely slept, each moment consumed with a mental replay of the stakes involved. She lay awake, grappling with a realization. This was more than an academic exercise. It was her way to reclaim her narrative, to demonstrate that authentic educators do not shy away from the uncomfortable truths shaping their students' futures. Finally, as dawn broke over the horizon, illuminating her small apartment, she made her decision. The forum would be about instilling awareness, yes, but even more so, it would seek to engage and empower, a call to action beneath the layers of urgency painted in her findings. As she examined her prepared notes one last time, a sense of responsibility surged within her, melding resolve with trepidation. What if she finally found the courage to voice what others were afraid to? The door swung open, ushering the incoming tide of uncertainty, but she stood firm, ready to confront the faces of apprehension and doubt. With a determined breath, she stepped into the fray. What she hadn't anticipated was that the hesitations of those around her would force her to confront her greatest fear. What if they weren't prepared for the truth she was set to reveal? The forum awaited, but so did the potential for unforeseen consequences. Could her bravery spark the transformation she envisioned, or would it set off a chain reaction spiraling beyond her control? The air was thick with anticipation as Sarah stood at the podium, the sterile brightness of the room amplifying the whispers that rippled across the faculty lounge. Faces stared back at her, some curious, others skeptical. Her stomach knotted as she gripped the edges of the podium, instinctively seeking stability in the midst of her turbulent emotions. This was the moment she had prepared for, yet nothing could alleviate the weight of uncertainty. As her gaze drifted across the audience, she detected the familiar faces of her colleagues, some genuinely interested, while others appeared poised for critique. It was an unsettling mix, one that tugged at her resolve, urging her to second-guess her decision. She inhaled deeply, her breaths echoing against the silence, summoning the courage she had nurtured throughout the week. With a purposeful motion, she flipped through her notes, but the words blurred momentarily, reminders of everything she had faced in the past flooding her thoughts. Doubt threatened to seep back in. What if they dismissed her argument as merely radical? What if the questions she posed didn't facilitate discussion but stirred conflict instead? "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice steadier than she felt. "Today, I want to discuss not just what we know, but what we can challenge. The stakes have never been higher." With her heart pounding, she elaborated on her research, weaving narratives from data, intertwining stories of potential repercussions of environmental neglect with searing urgency. A mixture of nods and frowns greeted her words. The uncertainty gripped at her chest. She pressed on, articulating the profound implications of disregarding evidence, unwilling to let their skepticism weaken her resolve. The unfamiliar sensation of empowerment began to build within, igniting a fire that pushed her to delve deeper. As she invited questions, a few hands cautiously raised, reflecting the same apprehension she felt. One of her longtime colleagues, a staunch traditionalist, stood up. "Are you suggesting that you have a solution to these dire predictions?" It sounds alarmist. Sarah's heart raced, yet she sensed an opportunity, a chance to pivot the narrative. "No, I'm not providing solutions. I'm urging us to ask the right questions and engage our students in these dilemmas. The goal is awareness, not fear-mongering." The simmering anxiety transformed into conviction as she realized her oversight. It was about empowering dialogue. She braced herself for pushback, ready to defend her stance. "If we are to honor our roles as educators, we must be willing to face uncomfortable truths. That what we owe to our students." The challenge sparked something in the room. Suddenly, the dynamics shifted. More hands shot up, questions now veering away from criticism toward collaboration. As she navigated the emerging dialogue, Sarah began recognizing the latent strength in her voice, the voice that had been silenced in the past. Engaging fervently, she harnessed the energy, leading conversations toward potential initiatives that could empower students. Each moment of interaction solidified her position, bolstered her confidence, and allowed her to step further into the role she aspired to embody as an educator. Towards the end, the forum took on a life of its own, transforming from a dry academic discussion into a vibrant exchange of ideas, challenges, and solutions. Sarah felt exhilarated, liberated from her doubts. Yet as the session wound down, she caught the eye of her colleague, his skepticism still thick in the air. Their differing perspectives remained unresolved, a tension still palpable despite the success of the discussions. Walking away, she realized the fresh tension. It wasn't an outright victory. It was a beginning fraught with complexities she hadn't yet anticipated. Once outside the room, the questions encircled her. Had she truly ignited change? Or had she merely scratched the surface of deeper dissent? This experience would be the catalyst for future encounters, but could she maintain her voice in the face of further opposition? As she prepared to exit the building, a lingering thought nagged at her determination. What awaited her in the uncharted territory of their ensuing dialogues, challenging or disheartening? With fatigue overshadowing her triumph, she steeled herself for whatever the next encounter would bring. The room still echoed with unresolved challenges, and she felt the tug of her own uncertainty. The moment had shown her the power of her voice, yet could she summon it again when it truly mattered? The following days were a volatile mixture of exhilaration and anxiety. Sarah's resolve was reinforced by supportive emails from colleagues who had attended her presentation. Yet, the lingering gaze of her skeptical colleague haunted her, as if it were etched across her thoughts. While some embraced the new path she proposed, others remained entrenched in old narratives, unwilling to shift. In the quiet of her office, papers piled high and marked with red ink, Sarah grappled with the knowledge that she wouldn't be able to sway everyone. The weight of her responsibility felt heavier than ever. Each article she read about environmental challenges reignited that fire within her. But with it came an all-consuming fear. What if her message wasn't getting through? Late one evening, while sifting through research studies, she stumbled upon a report detailing the psychological barriers educators face in addressing contentious subjects. As she read about the fears of backlash and isolation, she felt a pang of recognition. This wasn't merely a professional challenge. It was a personal battle against her own insecurities. What if the missing element in her approach wasn't just about the data or rhetoric but about her authenticity? Sarah decided then that she would not only be the advocate for change, she would also integrate her personal narrative into her teaching. The challenge lay in balancing the dual roles of her professional identity and her authentic self. In her next meeting with the faculty, Sarah brought more than just statistics and research. She shared stories from her childhood that had shaped her sense of responsibility for the planet. She recounted afternoons spent hiking, the deep forests, the cold rivers, and how those experiences fueled her passion for education. To her surprise, the room fell silent, captivated. This wasn't just a lecture. It became a shared moment of vulnerability. Among her colleagues, the challenge of shifting ideologies was palpable. Critiques still surfaced, but a subtle transformation was evident. Instead of polarization, there emerged curiosity. Colleagues began to share their experiences, integrating their own stories into the discussion. Sarah was amazed at how her willingness to be open ignited a similar authenticity in others. However, lingering doubts crept back in as soon as the meeting concluded. Could she keep this momentum? What if tomorrow's discussions reverted to those halting critiques? The internal conflict echoed. Was she brave enough to continue uncovering her truth, even if it placed her in uncomfortable situations? As the week unfolded, whispers of resistance from the more traditional faculty members turned into direct questions in academic circles. Sarah felt like she was stepping onto a battlefield, her convictions under siege. During a particularly heated discussion with her steadfast skeptic, their exchanges reflected the painful rift. Every word she chose had the potential to dismantle or fortify her argument, and with every challenge laid before her, there was an unsettling realization. This was not merely academic discourse. This was a confrontation of ideologies, beliefs, and identities. It became evident she had pushed against the boundaries of her comfort zone, but the real growth lay ahead. The conversation was only starting, and she needed to be the ally of the dialogue, fostering conversation even when it seemed most improbable. As she gathered her notes for the next seminar, resolve welled within her. Transformation didn't happen in isolation. It thrived in the friction between beliefs. The journey would demand resilience, and she was prepared to confront it head-on. Yet, with each decision to advocate for her vision, the nagging question grew louder. Had she solidified her stance enough to withstand the inevitable pushback, or would the resistance ultimately force her back into silence? With uncertainty looming, the next test of her courage was approaching, and the stakes had never been higher. As Sarah plunged deeper into her research, the environment of her office transformed from a sanctuary for inquiry to a battleground for ideas. The constant influx of new studies and articles left her overwhelmed, yet compelled to keep forging ahead. With every conflicting stance taken in meetings, each pushback against her evolving vision, doubts began coiling like ivy around her resolve. She questioned not just her approach, but the sincerity of her own voice within the cacophony of academic debate. That tension culminated in her next faculty meeting. The room charged with palpable electricity as she sensed her colleagues' anticipation, some narrowing their eyes skeptically, others poised for intellectual engagement. The stakes felt unfathomably high. Sarah understood in that moment that she would need to pivot her strategy. Instead of solely relying on personal anecdotes and emotional appeal, it was time for a tactical approach. She began to map out her presentation meticulously. This time, armed with a slew of research demonstrating the drastic changes to ecosystems and their cascading effects on humanity, she harnessed her newfound conviction. The revelation that came to her was profound. She would frame her argument not just through emotional connection but with irrefutable logic that interlinked her narrative. With each statistic and warning she delivered, the familiar skeptic sat glaring, a stark reminder of the resistance she faced. But there was no time for retreat. The data on climate migration and extinction rates were as urgent as her personal connection to the environment. She observed her peers' reactions: furrowed brows, tentative nods, and even murmurs of dissent. This time, however, the murmurs carried a note of consideration. The dialogue that unfolded ignited an unexpected realization within Sarah. Instead of alienating her doubters, they were beginning to grapple with the harsh truths of her message. It dawned on her that she needed to encourage questions rather than merely defend her stance. Inviting challenges would unveil layers of understanding both for herself and her colleagues. As the meeting progressed, she encouraged a discussion rather than a debate, employing her colleagues' insights to fortify her own arguments. Each question posed by skeptics deconstructed the barriers of misunderstanding. What if we shifted our curriculum to include this data? One professor suggested, their tone less skeptical, more curious. The realization that collaborative inquiry could lead to shared growth ignited a spark in Sarah. Perhaps she had not only taken a step toward proving her points, she was also cultivating a space where they could evolve as educators together. While the specter of resistance loomed, the atmosphere shifted. Hard questions were being engaged rather than dismissed. The transformative power of dialogue left her invigorated. But as her thoughts raced to envision what this would mean for future collaborations, she felt a flicker of anxiety. Would the warmth of this moment endure, or was it an aberration in a mostly adversarial climate? Doubts lurked around the corners of her confidence. Would they sustain this new depth of understanding during the inevitable disagreements to come? As she left the meeting, Sarah's determination coexisted with a profound sense of vulnerability, the realization that her development hinged not only on the strength of her arguments but on her ability to remain open to critique and co-create amidst adversity. With each passing day, the path toward meaningful change felt like walking a tightrope, balanced precariously between conviction and vulnerability. Her responsibility lay not just in championing her beliefs but in nurturing an environment that could brave the storms of uncertainty. As she contemplated her next steps, the daunting question echoed once more. Was she ready to transform her discomfort into a source of strength, or would she falter under the weight of anticipated criticism? The evolution of her journey beckoned with an unsettling allure, and she stood at the precipice of the next significant confrontation, yearning for clarity even as uncertainty enveloped her. In the wake of the faculty meeting, Sarah found herself seated at her desk, the sunlight filtering through the window in soft, warm beams. Yet the glow that illuminated her workspace felt remote, cocooned in a veil of lingering doubt. The exhilaration from the lively debate was fading like a distant echo. She was hyper-aware of the uneasiness thrumming beneath her skin, a tension that gnawed at her belief in the path she had chosen. Determined to embrace this vulnerability, Sarah leaned into it as fuel. She scribbled notes for herself, capturing the questions her colleagues had posed, almost as if they were pieces of a puzzle that needed assembling. Each question resonated with an unspoken challenge, a call to delve deeper into her research, to broaden her perspectives. More not just for her sake but for the collective benefit of those around her. Over the next few days, she explored a variety of sources. This was more than mere academic pursuit. It was about understanding the interconnectedness of ecosystems, the fragility of existence. With each study reviewed, Sarah unearthed new angles that not only fortified her argument but also rippled into neighboring fields. She could see how climate change tethered itself to economics, human rights, and social justice. The implications were far-reaching and compelling, connecting dots she had previously overlooked. As Sarah crafted her next steps, she began to plot a new workshop for her colleagues aimed at integrating these insights into their curriculum. The idea both thrilled and terrified her. It would be an opportunity to not only showcase her research but also to forge new alliances, to invite skepticism into a collaborative inquiry, and to transform it from a battleground of ideas into a fertile ground for dialogue. Yet, the thought of putting herself out there again felt daunting. What if the initial spark of curiosity from her colleagues faded? What if they returned to their shields of skepticism? The potential for rejection loomed, but so did an even greater potential for growth. Could she truly steer this change while risking another round of opposition? On the morning of the workshop, Sarah stood before the classroom filled with her peers, a concoction of anticipation and nervous energy swirling inside her. She had developed a presentation that intertwined and layered various elements of her research, blending data with poignant narratives. It was a tactical deployment, a dance between emotion and logic, where each statistic was intertwined with human stories to illustrate the stakes involved. As she began, It was apparent that some remained unconvinced, their features tight with skepticism. However, the newly introduced material sparked murmurs. Questions arose not from hostility but from genuine curiosity. Would they engage in the inquiry this time? Sarah encouraged questions and reframed skeptical comments into chances for deeper understanding. Why hasn't this been part of our discussions before? One professor asked, their tone softened by her invitation to explore rather than confront. In that moment, Sarah noticed a shift. What once felt like resistance transformed into a collective readiness to dig deeper. She navigated the discourse with adeptness, drawing on her colleagues' insights, creating a collaborative atmosphere where criticism became a stepping stone rather than a stumbling block. However, the very progress she witnessed stirred a new set of anxieties. If this dialogue flourished, it would demand more of her than she had anticipated. Would she remain resilient when disagreements re-emerged? Could she adapt her approach again, knowing that defensiveness could jeopardize the trust they had begun to foster? As the workshop concluded, Sarah felt exhilarated yet exposed. The doubts that had haunted her whispered insidiously, sowing seeds of trepidation. Behind the nurturing partnership that had taken root, lurking uncertainties flickered, each interaction a reminder of the stakes involved in willing vulnerability. The transformative journey she embarked on had only just begun. With the lesson learned, she understood that success lay in perseverance through discomfort, embracing each moment as vital to her growth. Yet, as she reviewed her notes, a question echoed more urgently than before. What if the evolving dynamics revealed not just the strength of her own voice, but the fragility of her place in an academic world wrestling with change? In that pivotal moment, Sarah realized this was only the beginning. The challenges ahead would define her, push her, and ultimately prepare her for the confrontation that loomed. The impending clash of ideas was inevitable. The burning question remained: could she endure the storm and emerge not just as an advocate for change but a leader capable of catalyzing it? As the days following the workshop rolled into a blur, Sarah felt the weight of possibility pressing down on her. The vibrant discussions had ignited a flicker of hope, but with that flame came a chilling acknowledgement of the hurdles yet to be faced. The dialogue had begun, yet the real test lay just beyond the horizon. Determined to sustain the momentum, Sarah immersed herself in her research with renewed vigor. She spent nights poring over datasets, cross-referencing studies, and seeking out emerging voices in environmental science, those who were challenging conventional narratives and breathing fresh life into the discourse. With every piece of information she integrated into her work, she felt herself transforming. No longer was she just an idea contributor, but a burgeoning thought leader. The classroom discussions had proven more than just an opportunity for engagement. They were a window into her colleagues' hopes and fears. She noted down the names of professors who had actively participated, considering how she could collaborate with them on joint initiatives. Perhaps a seminar series or a collaborative research project could stem from this newfound camaraderie. But alongside this strategic thinking lay a seed of doubt: would they remain committed, or was this merely a passing wave of interest? Her mornings began to shift as well. Instead of drowning herself in the minutiae of her research alone, Sarah scheduled coffee meetings and informal discussions outside the confines of the classroom. She sought out her colleagues, diving deeper into their perspectives while also sharing her evolving thoughts. Each interaction added layers to her understanding of the academic landscape, subtly stretching her personal and professional boundaries. Yet, the unease never completely dissipated. With every connection she forged, the implications of her growing visibility surfaced. She was not only advocating for change, she was inextricably tied to its reception. The stakes were no longer abstract. She questioned, could she handle dissent? Was she ready for pushback from those who once doubted her? One afternoon, as she reviewed notes from her latest meeting at a bustling cafe, a familiar face approached her, a professor renowned for his sharp critiques and unyielding skepticism. She had kept her distance from him, fearing confrontation would derail her progress. However, as he sat down, she realized it was precisely that apprehension that had to be confronted. "Sarah," he started, his tone nonchalant but his gaze piercing. "You've stirred up quite a discussion. I'm intrigued by your perspective, But I must ask, where does this enthusiasm stem from? Does it not feel like an uphill battle? His question hung heavily in the air. Each word was charged with the undercurrent of challenge, a test to her conviction. Sarah's heart raced as she considered her response, aware that any slip could unravel the connections she had worked so hard to build. I believe our students will inherit the world we leave them, she replied, met with a bemused yet contemplative expression. And that urges me to push boundaries, to open dialogue even when it's uncomfortable. His eyes narrowed slightly, signaling a deeper engagement than mere skepticism. Words are one thing, but can you synthesize that passion into tangible outcomes? What real change can come from all this dialogue? With each exchange, Sarah felt the thrill of being pinned against ideological walls. And yet, within the tension lay a glimmer of strength. His questions were not just challenges. They were invitations to delve further into her mission. It dawned on her that these moments of doubt were not individual setbacks. Rather, they were essential catalysts propelling her toward evolution. The conversation didn't resolve easily, yet it ignited something inside Sarah, a clarity about her purpose. Would she be capable of not only surviving opposition but thriving because of it? This evolving confrontation within herself as she faced colleagues who would push her to refine her beliefs was a crucible, in which her professional identity would be forged. Riding the wave of this awareness, she decided to structure her next workshop differently, centering it around open dialogue and conflict resolution, not solely focused on her research findings, but exploring uncomfortable questions together. She wondered, how could these uncomfortable moments serve as guides for her peers, reflecting the fragility of consensus while nurturing the spirit of inquiry? As her plans began to take shape, Sarah felt a renewed confidence. Yet with it emerged a new set of anxieties. Would her colleagues embrace the shift, or would vulnerability invite further challenge? The burning question on the edge of her thoughts lingered ominously. Could she lead her peers into this new territory and encourage them to embrace their own uncertainties alongside her? Determined to find out, she crafted the agenda for the upcoming session, her resolve strengthening. And as the date approached, one burning thought resonated above the rest. Would she summon the courage to confront herself and the academic world that lay just beyond her door? With the dawn of the anticipated workshop, Sarah felt a mixture of anticipation and trepidation. As she prepared her materials, the stakes felt higher than ever. She had challenged her colleagues to engage in difficult dialogues, and the time had come to see if they would respond to her call for change. In the silence of her classroom, each tick of the clock underscored the importance of her mission, propelling her toward the threshold of transformation. As her colleagues began to filter in, the atmosphere buzzed with an undercurrent of curiosity. Sarah took a moment to absorb the scene before her, a gathering of familiar faces, many still furrowed with skepticism, yet marked by a flicker of interest sparked by her earlier discussions. She stepped to the front, grounding herself with the unwavering belief that this workshop was more than just a presentation. It was a chance to cultivate a culture of trust and exploration. "Thank you all for being here today," she began, voice steady yet infused with passion. "This isn't just about addressing environmental issues. It's about what it means to be educators in a rapidly changing world. Our students are not just future inheritors of knowledge. They are the architects of the future we all must navigate." The dialogue flowed smoothly. Sarah had consciously designed this workshop to be less of a lecture and more of a collaborative inquiry. Each question and prompt invited her peers to voice their concerns, share their own experiences, and lend context to the data she presented. "Why does environmental literacy matter?" she asked, and that question unleashed a cascade of thoughts. Responses varied, revealing deep concerns about educational frameworks and the implications of their teachings. The discussions grew lively. Skepticism morphed into engagement as educators aired their uncertainties. As tension transformed into discovery, Sarah felt a surge of confidence. Her ambitions were not just abstract ideals, but were tangible within the vibrant exchanges taking place. Every counterpoint and every moment of vulnerability contributed to a richer understanding of their collective responsibilities as educators. Midway through the workshop, a colleague voiced a concern that twisted in Sarah's gut, like a sharp reminder of the challenges still facing her. How do we know that addressing this now doesn't just set our students up for despair? Are we exacerbating their anxiety? In that moment, Sarah understood that it was crucial to confront the fear. There is immense power in awareness, she responded firmly. But it's equally vital that we couple that awareness with the tools for empowerment. Just as we teach history so students can learn from the past, we can equip them with strategies to face an uncertain future. The conversation deepened, embracing the complexities of the issue. By framing dialogue around shared responsibility instead of impending doom, she witnessed a shift. Colleagues began to see that what united them was a purpose: educators invested in nurturing resilient, informed, and proactive young adults. As discussions unfolded, Sarah's heart swelled with pride. Her capacity as a leader began to bloom. For with every patronizing critique she had encountered in the past, she was now nurturing a culture where ideas could be questioned, dissected, and reshaped. Her authenticity had built bridges she once feared were irreparably broken. When the session wrapped up, a palpable sense of accomplishment filled the room. Colleagues approached Sarah to express appreciation for the new approach. "You've given us a lens through which to approach difficult topics," one remarked. "I feel like we can actually engage our students in a meaningful way." This feedback washed over her like balm. The true measure of her achievement had begun to solidify. She had not only confronted her doubts, but had also transformed them into an intrinsic part of her leadership style. Sarah stood taller, solidifying her role as not just an advocate for environmental education, but as a mentor willing to guide others toward embracing their discomfort. The weeks that followed witnessed an evolution within her peer group. Initiatives sprouted from the workshop, fueled by collective enthusiasm for interdisciplinary approaches to environmental education. Collaborative projects flourished, each one unraveling a thread of hope for a sustainable future. Yet, as her newfound recognition blossomed, so did another layer of complexity: the knowledge that vulnerability was not the absence of courage but was instead a pathway to genuine leadership. As she prepared for her next conversation with her skeptical colleague, Sarah was filled with determination, a realization that her well-founded stance had the weight of sincerity behind it. She understood now. True growth emerged from the intertwining of courage and vulnerability, an alchemy that enabled her to forge ahead, to make a difference, and to inspire others to follow. It was a journey of self-discovery, recognizing the strength that accompanied her authenticity as an educator. With solid confidence and established competence, Sarah had transformed immeasurably. She was no longer a mere mediator of knowledge, but a leader ready to catalyze change. The fear that had once shackled her began to dissipate, revealing a clear path to empower her students and colleagues alike. In the reflection of her hard-won achievement, she found not only personal fulfillment, but also a profound responsibility: the unwavering commitment to inspire the next generation toward a future rooted in knowledge and action. Now the call to action was hers to shape, her purpose clear and resolute. As she stepped into her next chapter, she knew one thing. She would relentlessly pursue the light of awareness, equipping herself and those in her orbit with the tools to stand up and face the challenges ahead. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Your engagement makes a difference. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. True fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.